Classic, I had this a lot as a kid. This is Hamburger Helper. In terms of calories, we can look on the side here. It's gonna add up. 25 carbs, 3 protein, half a fat. It depends on which ground beef you put. Cook the meat, 1 pound, it says lean ground beef or turkey, but not really sure. So let's see what the difference is when I make this in terms of macros, in terms of fullness, because this stuff I can eat a whole box. So, all right, here's what our substitute's going to be for our noodle. It's going to be a Banza. It's a chickpea base.
So here's the thing, these prepackaged options aren't bad in my opinion. They're just higher in calories. And yeah, there's a lot of preservatives, but there's ways to spin these, especially when you're, say, having more balance in your diet. You can choose a meat that's a little bit lower in calories. And what we're pretty much going to do is pick options out there that are going to save us on calories, but still give us flavor. That's kind of what's important, is to minimize that suffering by picking like fat-free cheeses. And there's the little Velveeta squares, which are a lot less calories than regular cheese. And adding veggies are always going to be a freebie for me. So we got an easy recipe today. It tastes pretty good, but what's most important is the ingredients you pick. Now, what you can do, and what I often do, especially when I'm trying to make a dish, is scan items first. Get the quantities before you make it, because once it's all made and said and done, it's hard to pull stuff out. So if I'm gonna make something like this, I'm gonna use that chickpea pasta. I'm gonna use fat-free cheeses, but if you just use fat-free cheese, what tends to be, it has this kind of weird texture. So sometimes I like to mix it with a regular cheese, just to kind of give it more of that, say, gooiness, and that's what I like to do. And so that's an easy way to do it. But for volume and your calories, you can just kind of sort of play around with the quantities and just make it kind of fit the need. And that way, you're not kind of second guessing, because you can always add stuff in later after you've made the recipe. And that's what I generally do, is to make sure to kind of get a general feel of how, make sure hit the protein first, and then once that's all said and done, then we can add carbs and fats. But that's kind of the first goal, is to make sure I'm 25-30 grams of protein per dish, and that's going to give it a lot of, say, satiation and make you full. And so for sure, I can go up to even like, say, 50 grams per meal. It just really depends on what I'm trying to do during the day. But for this one, we're going to make it taste good. We're going to make it something that is enjoyable. Mac and cheese is something that's easy to make, and rather than that Velveeta version, this one's going to be way higher in protein, lower in calories, and I can actually add to this. So see, 280 calories, 21 grams of protein. So I'm going to add a meat to this, but I could have added more fat-free cheese. A lot of different things you can do. So in this one, I actually chose a 99 ground turkey, just because it's the lowest in fat, it's high in protein, so it's lean. And I could have added more fats from cheeses if I wanted, but I also added the little bacon crumble just to give it a little bit of a different flavor, a different little texture in there, which I really like. So this meal is going to be a little bit lower in fat, just because that saves us on calories, but definitely isn't going to kill the flavor for us. So you can see there, macros: 35 protein, 37 carb, 8 fat, 340 calories, which is actually still less than a serving of that Velveeta. So this one's for sure is going to taste good. It's going to fill you up, and it's obviously really easy to make. So we'll go through that really quick just to show you how simple this is. So once we kind of have a recipe in mind and we put it in the FitnessPal and loaded it, we can start making it, and that way, we're kind of ready to cook it up. So with cheeses, what I like to do, or any dry ingredients, generally mix them together first, just to kind of blend them together so you don't have spots that are more or less. I'm a big fan of bacon, and you can get these little crumbles at Costco, that big bag, keep them in the fridge and add it, just a little bit is all it takes to give it that flavor. And there's nothing exciting about cooking pasta, but just follow the directions. I think it's about 8 minutes of boil, and then you're ready to go. We're just going to combine everything together and just kind of put it in trays. And you're going to want to make sure to mix this while it's still hot, or you can put this pasta in the meal trays, put the cheese, distribute it even on top. It doesn't really matter, because especially if you're going to reheat it. But this is one way I like to do it, just to get it done, and that way I don't have to do anything else. This is just one way to cook, is just to throw it all in and mash it together. So it really depends on your preference. But that silk right there, that's going to add just a few calories, and it's going to give it that creaminess. You could use milk, but the calories are going to add up, so that's one thing to pay attention to. That's like 30 calories per cup. And I'm a huge fan of making sure that my cooks are really fast. So this is a recipe you can make in under 10 minutes, really just boiling that pasta. I guess if you boil the water, it takes a few minutes. I'm obviously going to season it, so that's one thing important too, is if you have it bland, it's just not not going to taste that good. And salt is one thing, sure, you're going to hold a little more water. And I talked about it in the Endless series because at the end of the day, it's 0 calories. And to me, I want my food to taste good. And I can always manipulate carbs and salt later on, depending on what I want my physique to look like. So that's something when I get to that point, then I'll do it. And nothing fancy about this, just going to throw it into 4 trays, divide it up the best I can. You don't need to weigh those out, especially if you're going to eat them all. But if you're sharing, it's something that you may want to consider is to make sure they're pretty close. And you can do this with a lot of the different, say, prepackaged foods out there. And in general, this is what I always say is, find the foods that you like and find ways to spin them. Make them higher in protein, make them less in calories, and you can just season them to taste to your preference. And there's a lot of classic cuisine dishes I've spun to be, say, delicious and enjoyable. So when I'm in a deficit, I'm not suffering. Now, there's very few dishes that I haven't been able to spin just because the fats and sugars are so high. And when you really start to modify it, say more towards the protein side, it really just takes away the experience. So there's some dishes that need to be left alone. You can enjoy those when you're in balance. But since I'm in a deficit, I'm just going to have things that keep me successful. And when you start making meals that actually taste really good and most people wouldn't know the difference, you better make extra portions. This is only 4, so it's something that I'm conscious of, and I'd probably be making 8 just to make sure that I have enough for the week. But I'm also being considerate of others, and that's kind of important too, is in the environment, depending on who you live with or who you're around, you can be making a positive influence on getting healthier and being healthier, and showing that just because you're having less calories doesn't mean you need to suffer. So for the weekly prep, I'll usually have one dish that's really good, one dish that's meh, and the rest are kind of in between, or I would call pretty dang good. But for the most part, when I'm in a deficit, I want to be enjoying most of the food I'm eating, not all of it, but at least some of it.